What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we got to talk about State of the Agents September 2022. They are breaking down a lot about the state of the game, future balance changes, talk about what might happen, what they're looking at doing in the future, and they even tease the next agent. So there's a lot we got to talk about and break down. We are excited to introduce you to our brand new sponsorship, Outplayed. Now, Outplayed is the ultimate video capturing app for gamers, and you're going to be able to automatically capture your best moments and biggest plays, and even anything else with just the press of a button. Whether it's an ace, a sick goal, or maybe you completely whiffed and you want to share it with your friends, Outplayed makes sure you never miss an interesting moment, and then you can share it very easily with Discord, YouTube, or anywhere else. On top of that, there's a built-in video editor, so you can edit your videos from within the app, meaning you can record and output a ton of content, sending it to your friends, building up your channel, or anything else. Outplayed supports over 300 games, so what are you waiting for? Go check it out right now in the download links below. So they start off the State of the Agents telling us they will give us some insight into how they balance the agents from their pick rates and win rates, and it's going to be pretty informative, and also let us know what they plan to do about the characters that maybe people think are overpowered or underpowered currently in the game. First off, they want to talk about the state of the agent game. And they said this, quote, "With the agent changes we've made this past year, we've seen a bit of movement in role diversity, specifically the initiator role. With the addition of Fade, we've seen competition among picks when compared to previous months where Sova dominated the recon space. While we're happy to see players have another choice in the role, we also think that there are areas like clearing spaces where she's potentially overperforming, so we'll explore potential tunings to her utility." Now, to speak about that, Fade has been quickly climbing the pro and ranked pick rate, becoming far and away the best information gathering initiator, and Sova has also been falling in pick rate quite severely. And one of the big reasons for that is because of Fade's dog. It's honestly insane for clearing corners, and you just basically get to punish any bit of aggressiveness from enemies. You force enemies to play passively. It is so good at not only gathering information, but just allowing you to play your own game on your own pace. I do think that it's very, very strong. Not surprised it's getting nerfed in some way, but for those of you who have been abusing Fade, look out, because Riot is coming in with that nerf hammer before too long. Hopefully not too much though. Next off, they talk about Breach. Quote, "Breach's strengths on Fracture has upped his pick rate, and KO is starting to see a rise in competitive play. A few key agents are also starting to sprout in power, some in healthy ways, and other in ways that the team wants to address. You'll likely notice Chamber overtaking the Sentinel role, pushing his peers further behind in their presence. Although we shipped some incremental Chamber updates to address this, the results in competitive and watching champions show that there is still more work to be done here, and he will continue to be a focus for us moving forward." This brings up the topic we want to focus on the most. How do we decide when an agent needs a change and monitor if we hit the mark with these updates? When we approach agent balance, we employ multiple lenses to help drive what changes should be made and their goals. That is to say, there is no single metric that tells us to act. Here's a quick overview of some of these lenses that we commonly leverage. Win rate and pick rate in solo queue. So they gather a whole bunch of data and they look at agent non-mirror win rate across MMR tiers across different maps to get a high level gauge of power. So when you gather enough data, let's say you gather it among the entire plat rank, right? And every single time there's a team that has a chamber on it and the other team doesn't have a chamber on it, how are all of those games win rates compared to the teams that don't have chamber on average? And if you do that across, I don't know, 100,000 matches or whatever, you get some legitimate data to say, this character is making this much percentage of impact every single time they're in a game on average, and that is too much or not enough. Or you could basically use that to see if there's any agent that is overperforming at any given rank and basically use that to help properly balance things. And keep in mind, things can be really overpowered in a low rank or a high rank and not be overpowered in other ranks. And that might be due to the skill difficulty of the character. That might have to do with the fact that the character is aim based, or maybe it's the fact that the character is a character that Smurfs often use. But of course they have to break apart this data and use it in order to make a decision on how to balance the game going forward. Another thing they also take into account is player perception, just how players on average feel about a certain character. And oftentimes that comes down to whether or not they feel something is too strong, weak, frustrating, whatever, because there's things that might not be apparent in like the win rate, for example. You could have a character that doesn't win more on average, but is incredibly frustrating to deal with. The best example of this was like Breach when he had 3 freaking flashes. So you could get stunned, flashed, and you just like want to die. And it doesn't matter that he wasn't a very strong character. It also didn't matter that he didn't have a very high win rate. He was very frustrating to play against. And that's just one of many examples. They do take player perception into account. Of course, they also look at pro play. Valorant is a very competitive game, often balanced from the top down. For the most part, they do like to squash abnormalities at every rank so people have a good time and aren't super frustrated. But in general, top-down balance approach, so they definitely look at pro pick rate. And then their design principles is the last thing. So they want to assess how the agents that they are creating are fitting into the design principles the team holds. And they say this, quote, one example here that we talked about often is that an agent's sharpness, meaning do they have clearly defined strengths and weaknesses compared to their peers. When an agent isn't hitting our design principles, it can drive change even if they aren't an immediate issue when evaluated through our other perspectives. So they can be hypothetically balanced and people could generally like it and it's not overpowered in pro play, but if it has like no weaknesses or, you know, it has all weaknesses or there's not a clearly defined identity among a character, it's blending too much with other characters, they would change it for these reasons. Another thing they really speak to in the entire next paragraph that I'm going to summarize that is really insightful is the designing game balance versus balanced perception. The ultimate summary is, quote, for the Valorant team, how players perceive the balance of the game is as important as the true numerical balance of the game. They go on to state, in fact, some changes could make the game more balanced, but don't actually change how the game is played. And the example they give here is that if a character is relatively strong but has a low pick rate, they don't really have a lot of room to buff them to convince players otherwise. And they actually reference Brimstone here. So basically, by a lot of the metrics and like the win rate metrics that they can analyze across ranks, they can look at a character and say, this character actually wins quite a bit of time. Like he wins a lot and he has a high win rate. So hypothetically, he should be more played, but he's not. And that's about perception with the community or just general enjoyment of the kit, or there's a lot of factors that could go into it. But if you were like just looking at the stats and say, hey, this character's not played enough, let's buff him to the point where he's played, even though he has a above average win rate already, it could make the character completely broken when you got him to the point where he was played a ton. And that's just one of many examples that they have to think about before they touch a character or balance a character. Now, they actually give us some crazy cool insights in the form of fun facts about different agents. So let's read them out. First off, KO. They say, one of our weaker agents in ranked games across all MMRs, but a high priority pick in pro play. KO is one of the most broken characters, period, but it seems that he has a low win rate in ranked play, and that could be for a number of reasons. The fact that KO is better when you synergize with teammates. The fact that players and teams as a whole aren't capitalizing on the loss of ability that is gained with KO. There's more power in the mechanical skill when things aren't leveled out, especially at the highest level. There's a lot of factors that could go into that. Next up is Breach, Brimstone, and Neon. And their fun fact said, play these agents in a coordinated setting like a 5-stack, and you'll see them shine even more than solo queue, especially at the highest MMR. Perhaps there's a really high win rate when associated with these. I know that for a fact, Breach and Neon combined is just a freaking nightmare when you got two people that are synced up and constantly running it down, especially on Fracture. Next up, they talk about Yoru and Neon. Put in the time, put in the hours. Most of our agents have a learning curve, but these two especially stand out at the highest MMR as high mastery agents. So when we're talking about Immortal Radiant, God tier Yorus and Neons probably have a really high win rate, and that's why they're pointing them out in particular. When you master these characters, you reach a certain level that is just very hard for other characters to touch via win rate. Next up is Phoenix, the third strongest agent in solo queue in high MMRs. That's surprising, right? That surprised me. That's very surprising. But honestly, Phoenix flashes are hard as hell to freaking turn on. They're so goddamn hard to turn on. And Phoenix can do a lot of things by himself. For ranked, he's amazing. Next up is Brimstone. 3x as many players believe this character is too weak versus too strong, but he has one of the highest win rates in higher MMRs. They just referenced that before, and that's very, very insightful. You would think that Brimstone just has an average win rate, but that's not true. Next up is Sage, still one of the best agents in the game across all skill bands in ranked, despite player sentiment indicating that they're the 4th weakest agent. They go on to talk about why they haven't shipped large buffs to KO despite the fact that he has some of the weakest by the numbers win rate across all ranks, and they basically say the data indicates that he's powerful, pro players utilize him well, players across the board don't think he's a weak character, the team doesn't think he's a weak character. So any changes, if at all, they would make to KO would just aim to make him more intuitive and accessible without increasing the optimized potential they see in pro play. Really interesting. Now on the flip side, they have Chamber, and honestly, they say Chamber's rank stats are nothing to be alarmed at in terms of win rate. Like, it's slightly above average, if anything, but the effect he has on the ecosystem is negative. His pick rate goes dramatically up as players get better at the game. Perception is clear that he is too powerful, and he's a must pick on many more maps than they would like in pro play. So on the power front, they'll nerf Chamber in ways that should make drawbacks of picking him sharper, with the intention that our best players shouldn't always gravitate towards Chamber. Now in the next section, they talk about both Cypher and Phoenix. First off, they say that they are looking closely at Cypher to figure out what updates he might need to find his proper spot on the Sentinel roster. And of course, that's also going to come at the same time that Chamber nerfs potentially come in as well. Next up is Phoenix. They're saying that according to the stats in ranked, Phoenix is looking pretty powerful, and they say that his flash is one of the strongest in the game by their metrics, but it's too early to say if Phoenix will have a stronger impact or place in the pro ecosystem, or if his level of performance in ranked will sustain over time. But early signs are promising that picking Phoenix is no longer a gamble, but for the future, they're also looking over the flash landscape to sharpen what the correct strengths and weaknesses are for all the flashing initiators versus flashing duelists. I do think it's interesting how the flashes should have like a more clear identity between the roles and what one does over the other. Like, do duelists get the better flashes? Do duelists get the flashes that pop, the flashes that are versatile? Do initiators get more freedom with their flashes? Like, there's a lot of different things with that. Like, how are you going to properly balance it? There's a lot of questions here. Now, finally, the moment you've been waiting for, they talk about the new agent, and they say, quote, "We've seen that controllers are in a bit of a drought, and it feels like we have to go all the way back to ancient times to our last new controller release with Astra. Aside from Viper, introducing controllers that can cover large open areas in a blue ocean of opportunity. We let this soak long enough, and Agent 21 is almost ready to go out. I don't want to flood you with too much information in this blurb here, so I'll hold off on saying much more." And it's a picture looking out on the ocean. And yeah, if that wasn't really on the nose, we learned 3 things. 1, it's a controller, 100%. We kind of already knew that. 2, the controller is going to be much more similar to Viper in the fact that it can cover large open areas. And maybe even different, like a new type of controller that is not someone that can just cover in a line, but might be able to create smokes that cover, you know, giant chunks of the map. That would be kind of interesting. The only thing we have that does that right now to the same extent as I'm imagining is like Viper's ultimate, but maybe that on a smaller scale, who knows? And also, the freaking water and ocean puns are just like all over the place. So obviously this character is something to do with the ocean, is like a, you know, codename mage, maybe a water mage. We have no idea at this point, but you know, I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. And I really liked this freaking State of the Agents. It gave us a lot of insight. So yeah, well done, Riot. I appreciate the transparency. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.